This is a continuation of the virtual coaching session on the topic of assumptions and risk. We're ready for the second topic of risk, and that's what I'll be covering now. I'd like to start by asking a question of you. I said in the earlier module that assumptions are connected to risk. So I'm going to ask, can you turn this assumption into a risk? And the example is that commodity prices remain stable over the duration of the project. You should have come up with something that is similar to the example that I have on the screen now. Basically, what you're going to be doing with your assumptions is you're going to be turning the positive statement that has been connecting your logic of the vertical hierarchy of objectives with the horizontal logic in the log frame. You're going to turn that positive statement into a negative that will become part of the risk management system. So in this example, I said that the risk is an increase in commodity prices will increase cost and are likely to cause either over expenditure or reduction in scope. So you see that the assumption is a positive and the risk is a negative. Now I'd like you to do this example to see if you understand this. So turn this assumption into a risk. The assumption is that the District Forestry Service does not prematurely transfer trained officers from the project area. All right, you should have come up with something that looks similar to what I have on the screen right now. I said that the risk associated with that assumption would be the director of the District Forestry Service transfers officers to other projects immediately after completion of the training. So again, you see that it's the same content, it's the same problem, it's the same issue, but instead of having it as a positive to complete the logic, using it as assumption in the log frame, we've now turned it into something that is a risk and can be managed. Now I'd like you to write your own assumptions, or at least one assumption, and then I'd like you to turn it into a risk. Then you take the risks that have been developed and you will put them into a format that is called a risk register. The one that I'm going to show you now we call a quantifiable risk register because it has numbers that can be used and allows for some comparison between the risk. You could also do a qualitative risk register, and you can do this in a logbook on a computer using software, simple software such as Microsoft Word or Excel, or you could use a project management program. So here are the columns that we've put into the matrix. First of all is just a description of the risk, and you'll see that I've put in the one about commodity prices increasing, causing over expenditure or a reduction in scope. And now we're going to look at two dimensions related to what is the probability, how likely is it that this will happen, and what would be the impact, what would happen, how bad would it be if this risk were to become a reality, if it were to become an issue. And we're going to give it a score of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest probability, lowest impact, and 10 being the highest. So you'll see the team here has chosen 3 as the probability for this happening, which is relatively low, but there's still a chance. And then they've said that if it does happen, then it's going to be pretty severe, so they've given it an 8. Now they've also done in the next column a composite score. And there's two ways of doing this. One is to just multiply the two numbers together. So you'll see that the first one, we've done 3 times 8, and that equals 24. And then you'll have scores on all of your risk, and you can compare those. Another way is to do a mean score, which is 3 plus 8 divided by 2, and you get 5.5. You need to assign someone to be the owner and manager of this issue. That's extremely important. And then you need to take some actions. I haven't filled that quadrant in. I'd like for you to think about what some of the actions might be. Okay, here's what I have come up with, and there would be numerous other ones that you might have identified. They could look for alternative suppliers if certain suppliers increase the prices. They could agree before they begin the project with the vendors for forward pricing to lock in the price. Or if the pricing increase happened, then they might have to decrease the scope that they're trying to accomplish in the project. In this slide, I've added the second risk in order to show you how you can use multiple risk in a comparative way. And so the risk that we identified on the earlier slide was that the Director of District Forestry Service transfers officers to other projects immediately after completing the training. And the people who prepared this risk register said there's a mid-level probability that that could happen, that it's not really high or really low, so they gave it a 5. But they said if it does happen, if those staff members do get transferred, that's going to be really bad, so they gave it a 9. Then you'll multiply 5 times 9 to get a raw score of 45, or you can do the mean score, 5 plus 9 divided by 2 equals 7. Now that you have two scores, you can compare the two risks to see which one might be the highest priority for management. So you could see that even though these numbers are different, the ranking comes out the same, so that this risk, the second risk, is probably the one that you need to give your priority attention. And you can see if you had several more that this would allow you to do some kind of a ranking. So again, give it an owner, and then you can see that the actions that have been suggested are to secure written assurances from the district that trained staff stay for the life of project, or to train extra staff to compensate for the transfer. On your screen now, you'll see another risk register. On this one, I've added 3 risks. First of all, vendors may delay in delivering materials. Second, high mileage project vehicles could suffer major breakages. And then number 3, women and children may not be able to participate because of local cultural traditions. We've already given the probabilities for each of them and the potential impact, and we've assigned an owner. Now there are several cells that are blank in the yellow, and what I'd like you to do is to fill in those blanks. First of all, do the composite score using either or both of the methods that I show you. Then do the ranking, which one is number 1, highest priority, number 3, lowest priority for taking the time for management, and then suggest some possible actions that might be used to manage each of these risks. The raw scores are 36, 24, 27. The mean scores are 6.5, 5, and 6, so you can easily see that this top one is the number one highest priority issue, and then we have number two at the bottom, and the second one is number three. So that's one of the ways that you can use the quantitative scores. Some of the actions that you could take: you could identify alternative vendors. You could screen vendors to identify those with on-time delivery history, or you could negotiate a penalty for late delivery. You could also positively give an incentive for on-time or early delivery. The problem with the breakages on the high mileage vehicles: you could simply replace the vehicles. You could stockpile spare parts and hire mechanics so that you're ready to fix them. You could hire outside private vehicles when necessary because of the breakages. And then the problem with women and children not being able to participate because of local traditions: you could relocate the project to another area where participation is allowed. You could ask as a precondition that you should get permission to allow women and children to participate in the project, or you could build an awareness campaign on the importance of participation as part of the project. Here's the next question. I'd like you to think about an answer. Is every assumption a risk? My answer is yes. At least I think about 99% of the time an assumption becomes a risk. So you can easily take all of your assumptions from the log frame and turn them into risk as a starting point. The question I'd like you to consider now: what is the difference between an assumption and a risk? An assumption, if you remember correctly, is a statement that is identified in order to complete the cause and effect, the if-then logic of the log frame. A risk, then, is a possibility that's been identified in order to manage. An assumption is usually a positive, a risk is usually a negative. Once a risk becomes a reality and is happening, then it's called an issue.